has grown to unbelievable now.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I'm your host Hana Zaberi and welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. Thank you for joining us on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim-focused network. You can always watch us 24/7 on Samsung Galaxy 19, Amazon Fire TV, Roku TV, and Apple TV. While speaking out about different ways we may seek to implement justice in all of its aspects within the Muslim community and outside of the Muslim community, we also tend to neglect the justice that needs to be afforded to our brothers and sisters with disabilities. This necessitates that the Muslim community, like other religious communities, should mobilize and advocate for policies to accommodate our disabled members of our community. Additionally, this also includes efforts to make our masjid spaces more accessible, accommodating, and welcoming for those with disabilities as well. These are some of the things that often come to our mind when we're talking about Muslims with disabilities, especially with living in a post-pandemic world. Joining us today is Hana Khan. Hana Khan is the Operations Management at Muhsen, which stands for Muslims Understanding and Helping with Special Education Needs. She has many years of experience as a project manager and is excited to utilize these skills in her role at Muhsen. She's currently working on managing current programs as well as implementing new programs to benefit the special needs community. Her philosophy aligns with Muhsen in that every individual should be included and supported in all aspects of society. Welcome, Hana.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me today. It's such an important topic, so I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about the rights of disabled, especially during COVID.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know when you're running an organization that is doing such important work and, being so entrenched in the community, taking time out, your time is precious and we're really glad to have it. Please introduce yourself to our audience and describe your background and how you got involved in special needs advocacy.
Yeah, sure. So like you said, my name is Hana and I'm the operations manager at Muhsen. The reason I got involved, I actually have a child with special needs. So, of course, I have a passion to help these individuals and to help this organization grow. So I've actually been a volunteer as a project manager for Muhsen for a couple of years now. So I've gotten to know the team and see how they work. And I really, love how they work as professionals. So I just started working for them on an official basis in October. And I'm working on several projects and a few exciting projects coming up in the future, such as an adult day program that we're really excited about, which we were getting ready to roll out before COVID hit. So that kind of, put a little damper in our plan. But I'm just really looking forward to everything that's coming up in the future from Muhsen, and I'm really excited about it.
Tell us more about, for those of our audience that have never heard of Muhsen, tell us more of what Muhsen does. I know I've seen you at conventions, I've seen panels at conventions, and I've seen that Muhsen sign, but tell us more of the daily work that Muhsen does.
Sure. So Muhsen is actually a nonprofit organization that's there to advocate for individuals with special needs. So we have actually chapters all across the nation to help us, reach that goal. And some of the programs we have, for example, is a MASJID certification program. So just to really simplify that, because I could go on talking about it for a while, is that we ask masjids to be accommodating for those with special needs. And we have specific checklists and goals that we ask them to meet. So it could be anything from physical access for a wheelchair, for example, to, programs khutbahs, awareness events, youth training, just really bringing that awareness to our community so that people are talking about the subject and are educated about it, and trying to get rid of that stigma. So, especially with the youth training, we have a next generation that's, learning about these disabilities and how do you socialize with those individuals. You mentioned the convention support. So like for all the major conventions, it's not, for example, we do like childcare, so those families can come. We do, and it's not necessarily childcare, but it could be an adult or anyone with a disability who needs support there. We do like ushering, helping with wheelchairs, helping with ASL interpreters. So those are different convention supports. And then we do Muhsen UMRAH, which is the first of its kind. And I know that brings a smile to everyone's face. The first of its kind to support families who have someone with an disability to go to UMRAH. So those families have a one-to-one volunteer for 8 hours a day while they're there, so that they can do their worship too, instead of just taking care of the individual with special needs. So it's kind of their support, and I'm sure you can imagine the logistics that go into that kind of planning to have special buses and different accommodations like that. So we're like the first group that actually really accommodates for each of those individual needs. We have weekend schools for children to get Islamic education. So if you can imagine, before that, teachers are not trained and equipped to give an Islamic education to these children. So we have trained teachers. They have TAs that work one-on-one with these kids in the classroom to get Islamic education. They all go to, do wudu in the bathroom, and they go to prayer, and they learn, Arabic alphabet, everything. So, and that's all our curriculum that's designed in-house as well. So, those are a few of the programs that we do. That's kind of, and like I said, we're growing into, doing adult day program and a few other exciting projects coming up as well.
That's so beautiful about the Sunday school program. I used to be a Sunday school principal for years. And I remember in our MASJID, we did have a young boy with autism, and his mom brought him in with his other siblings. And that was one thing that we tried, even then, this was like 15 years ago, to try to be as inclusive as possible. And it was just such a joy to have him there. But we always felt like we didn't have the tools needed.
Right. And it's not easy. It's like such a specialized field, special education teachers, they are really specialized, to have that training. But alhamdulillah to you guys for trying. That's so great. And I'm sure you did a fantastic job. And it's just so, you could see how much that you benefited from having them there too, as much as they benefit from coming to school. It's like your interactions with them, I'm sure, has changed you as a person as well.
Exactly. Well, I think we have a video featuring Muhsen's work that we'd like to show.
Sure.
And then we'll carry on the conversation. We're obviously having some tech difficulties, but
that's okay. It happens all the time.
We can move on with our conversation.
Sure.
So the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively impacted lives of so many different individuals, but many tend to overlook the added difficulties are supporting others with disability.
In a short amount of time.
Okay, I guess we're ready.
Alhamdulillah, our organization, which seemed like a mere dream just years ago, has grown to unbelievable measure, mashallah. Yet we've just scratched the surface. And the more we do, the more we see there is to do.
Part of the MASJID certification program is not just making sure there's an elevator or a ramp for our people with special needs. It's also making sure that we're elevating the conversation when it comes to changing the hearts and minds of the community. Open the doors to the MASJID, not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, and everything in between. It meant the world to them. Now, alhamdulillah, we're definitely armed with some amazing khatibs who have helped us out to be able to give those khutbahs and affect people. That welcomingness is there right from the door to the minbar.
Everyone that works with kids with special needs, it's a reward itself, but being able to teach them Arabic letters and Quran and about our prophets and who is Allah, that's the best thing ever. We'll get messages from parents like, oh, he said Alhamdulillah. He's praying with his siblings, he's praying with his dad. To be involved in the Muhsen Weekend School program itself is commitment, but you also have to be passionate and you have to love it because you're coming every week to work with these kids and these kids know that we care about them. It's just so beautiful seeing a community come together for these kids because they truly deserve it.
I just feel really blessed and honored to be in the company of these families that are so strong. The idea of just relieving these families and providing support so they can pray in the most blessed places on earth, knowing that their children are in the hands of volunteers that understand their needs. That's what Muhsen UMRAH has been all about. By the blessing and grace of Allah, it happened. And a lot of these families are saying, that was a lot easier than I thought. Of course, it's challenging to travel, but at the end of the day, it happened. It was smooth. So if you have children with disabilities and you've thought about UMRAH, but you've always felt that it's so unattainable, it's not. It can happen. And we're here to help you. And Muhsen UMRAH is committed to doing this, inshallah, again and again. And we want you to join us.
I walk because I support people with special needs.
Team Muhsen has officially been named the top team with the largest number of walkers. It shows how the community can come together and support our brothers and sisters with disabilities. Having a disability should not be a stigma. It should not be a reason for these families to stay at home and stay quiet. We want to show that we support them. As a community, we want people to come out and we want people to be aware that there are others here who support them.
Respite is a period of rest or relief. What we use it in terms of Muhsen is giving families that have people with special needs a break. A couple months ago was Ramadan, and I got so many respite requests for families that had said that since we had a child that had a disability, I haven't entered the masjid. They haven't gone to Jummah Salah. They haven't been able to go to Eid Salah. They haven't been able to go to Tarawih. They haven't been able to attend a doctor's appointment. Their other children's maybe like track meet, go on a vacation, or even take a nap. As volunteers, we're able to give just a little bit of time, maybe 1 or 2 hours. If our intention is in the right place, what I tell our volunteers is that, inshallah, this can be a means for us to get into Jannah because we're taking care of these beautiful people, these pure people that have disabilities. And that also allows the primary caregivers, most of the time parents, by freeing up their time just a little bit, we're able to hear their voices. And that's beautiful.
Yay!
Muslims with disabilities growing in numbers, we think about the future. We think about residential facilities, support groups, consulting, youth training, other disability services, accessibility, to go beyond just the talk, beyond creating the awareness, to support and help these people. We need to be there to help them. We need to be there through Muhsen.
SubhanAllah, that is just, I just feel like that's Jannah work.
I love working here.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about a lot of injustices on this show because we do a lot of anti-genocide work and stopping atrocities across the world, war, anti-war. And then this is something, and a lot of that seems so out of our reach. We don't know if we can, what we're doing is helping others or how, and it's a very long, that fight is a very long fight as well. But alhamdulillah, the work that you're doing, at least, to be able to see the impact of your work in a smile of a child's face is, subhanAllah, that is such a blessing. So kudos to all of you on that, mashallah.
Thank you.
And my question was that, with the pandemic, the lives have been impacted across the world. But many tend to overlook the added difficulties that our sisters and brothers with disabilities face in such an upheaval of their normal schedule. For many children with disabilities face this change is hard to process and continues to be hard to process. Wearing a mask can be a serious challenge. So what sort of difficulties do you think people with disabilities face in this pandemic that others overlook?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, if you can think of all the challenges that we are facing as, typical able-bodied individuals, everything is just magnified greatly for those individuals with, special needs. The lack of structure is really huge. These individuals, they really rely on that structure for their day-to-day life. I mean, it gives them their purpose. It really grounds them. And I know just for us, having a lack of schedule can be just so disorienting and kind of throw us off. But at least, we kind of can comprehend what's going on and try to, bring ourselves back together. Whereas especially children with special needs who have a hard time with comprehension or that higher level abstract thinking skills where it's like, there's this disease and that's the reason we can't go out and we don't know what's going to happen. That's a really difficult concept to grasp. I think even for typical kids, but, this is all, again, magnified for, children who, struggle so much with comprehension of what's going on in their day. And that structure is really, like I said, what gets them from one activity to another. Like I wake up, I get dressed, I go to school, and that's what gives them purpose. Like every day they have to do that same structure. So to take that away from them is really disorienting. And, same thing for adults too. Like there could have been a lot of adults who live independently and they get up and they go to either a job or they go to, a day center. And a lot of that has been shut down now. So, they're also stuck at home without this routine that, again, helped ground them, help regulate, their bodies and their minds. And then also like even for education, like the whole e-learning situation. And I know, every parent can relate to that. That's not really an ideal situation for any child. But for children with special needs during COVID, e-learning is really difficult because if you think about how their classroom is structured, they have specialists in and out of that room all day supporting them. So they have a speech therapist that comes in, every day, as far as I know, like in most schools. they have a speech therapist that comes in every day, works with certain kids, makes sure, they're comprehending their lessons. If they need help with speech, we have occupational therapists that help with sensory. So if you can imagine, like if kids are, overstimulated or understimulated, they pull them out, they let them go jump on the trampoline a few minutes, they go bounce on the yoga ball, or, all their, tools that they have to help support these kids. And then they go back to the class and they can learn. That's not available through e-learning. And it's hard for parents, especially if they're working, to come and give those kids those constant breaks and get them back on track. Schools have mental health specialists that help. They have social workers. They have, all the supports that are kind of stripped away now with e-learning. And, that's the really difficult part for the kids. And then, like I mentioned, for adults, like if they were independent, if they did have jobs and were going out, now, they feel compromised, like their health is compromised. And, a lot of them don't drive, so they rely on public transportation, which again is a risk to their life if they use public transportation, and a lot of them, they don't have the opportunity for work at home jobs. They go to vocational work and usually have to be on the job. And it's really difficult for them because either they have to risk, this health situation, or, they won't get a paycheck. So that's, really difficult for both children and adults at this time.
And this is so, and this situation has really bared the sort of discrepancies and, like how it's revealed this innate ableism in our society. I'd really like to get your thoughts on what truths have been laid bare about the way people with disabilities are treated on a daily basis.
So that ableism, like you said, is there. So for those people who are not familiar with that term, ableism is just discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. So, for example, when the government is making their policies or procedures regarding COVID, they're favoring able-bodied people because they're not taking into consideration, the thoughts and the challenges of those individuals with special needs. So, well, let me just rewind for a second, because some people might be saying, well, so what? It might be the small population. So I actually just pulled the numbers from CDC just yesterday, so I could have like the most updated numbers. So actually 26% of the population is affected with a disability. And that's 61 million people in the United States. That's 1 in 4. So 1 in 4 is a huge number. And so that itself shows that this demographic needs to be accounted for when making any kind of decisions or policies. And we see, we don't see that happening very much. Even like how I just mentioned with the e-learning, that's not taking into account disabled children when they come up with these policies. Or, like there's a few companies, for example, that have like those special shopping hours for, people who are disabled or seniors. And, that's really great. And that's, I applaud those companies that have like the, foresight to like think of those individuals, but it's only a handful. And when you think of, 1 in 4 people are affected, there should be a huge amount of, companies taking the stance of, we need to give special hours, we need to protect these individuals, which we don't really see happening.
And when you put it that way, 1 in 4, see, that is something that is hard to ignore. But
exactly.
The majority of people think, oh, it's just a time, because is that because a lot of times there's this invisibility.
Exactly.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of nailed that. And that's exactly why I had to like pull and mention that statistic, because I just know people have that mindset of invisibility when it comes to disabilities. It's because maybe you don't know someone personally in your family, or may not have run into it very much. And, people with disabilities, it's not like they're out and about so much in everything, even in the Muslim community, it's hard for them to go to the masjid, go to events. So people think that just because they're not there and they're not present, that they don't exist. And it's just completely the opposite. They exist just inside their home. So that's the same thing. I think that's kind of like a universal issue with disabilities, is that, it's hard for them to get out. It's hard to go to events and socialize and things like that. So people don't know that they're there, and it's easy to become invisible in that case.
let's talk about the Muslim community a little bit.
Mhm.
In MASJID, they're opening up. Other religious institutions have either slowly reopened or are revealing plans to reopen. But there's not, these plans do not provide resources for Muslims with disabilities who either can't leave their houses or don't have the proper support in these institutions in the first place. So, do you have any commentary to offer on how our religious institutions need to change to accommodate our sisters and brothers with disabilities?
Yeah, so, well, we definitely all know that space is limited with the reopening. But what I would say to that is that if space is limited and you're allocating, a certain amount of spots for male and female, then allocate a few spots for, those with disabilities, like, a wheelchair spot, accommodation, something like that. So, just as an example, like if you have 50 spots, save 2 for a wheelchair, do that accommodation, save that spot, make sure it's accessible. Shouldn't be just some spot in the corner that you threw on there just to have, to check off a box. And speaking of check off a box, I noticed like with Eid coming up, there's a lot of masjid that have like a registration form where you can fill out if you're going to be attending so that they can, control the numbers. And I noticed that in a lot of those registration forms that there is nowhere to indicate if you need a special accommodation. So example, if you are coming in a wheelchair, if you need a ASL interpreter, as just a few examples, there's nowhere on that form to indicate your needs. And I think that is just such a simple change that they can make to, know who's coming to these events and how you can help support them. So that's, a couple of things they can do. And I actually want to give an example of, we have Eid coming up Friday, and there's a lot of masjids planning like outdoor Eid events. And we had a masjid leader, reach out to our executive director and say, hey, this is something different out of normal. What can I do to help, the disabled community? And I just feel like that is such a sign of strong leadership. And, may Allah protect that person who did that. Just to show, like, as a leader, you're thinking about everyone, not just able-bodied people, not just certain segment of people. Like, you're proactively thinking about everyone and then reaching out for help, because this is something different. Like maybe they know in a regular situation how to, support their community, but in this, strange world we're in right now, they reached out, they asked for help, they asked what they can do. And I think that's just, what all leadership needs to look at. Like if you are a leader and you've put yourself in that position, then you need to lead everybody and you need to think about all their needs and how you can help them and be proactive, like how this leader was. Don't be reactive, wait for something to happen and then realize, like, have that proactive thought process. I think that just shows such strength in your mind and your thinking when you're thinking in that manner. So I just wanted to give that really good example of someone who did that.
And some of that happens when sometimes there are people in leadership who have people with disabilities in their family, so they actually know firsthand. So reaching out to people in the community who perhaps might be in that situation and bringing them on board, just so you can, look through at your community through their lens.
Exactly. That's such a great point. Yeah. And then even, as you mentioned about the reopening, I had mentioned about the masjid certification program earlier, and I just wanted to kind of throw out there that this is actually a really good time for you to start looking into masjid certification, because like you're kind of starting fresh. You want to reopen in the best way possible, put yourself in a good position that, you're really looking after everyone. And there's actually a lot of our programs that can be done without even being open right now. Like there's so much virtual, we could do virtual khutbahs around disabilities. We could do virtual awareness events. We've even done virtual youth training. So you don't have to wait till the doors open to even get started. So I would just say if there's anyone in that position watching this video, to just reach out to us and we can even help get that process started before you open.
That's so, the fact that you guys are there and there's this resource in the Muslim community, this is something that absolutely, people need to know about. And I've seen this, like I covered, I used to work for a local newspaper. And I can tell you that this was something surprisingly, because a lot of times we feel like people are ignoring an issue, and a lot of times they just don't have the resources. Our community is strapped.
Exactly. Like they may just not know, don't have the experience, but that's what we're here for. That's what,
Muhsen came along.
that's why I'm so glad you guys are, helping us spread the word so people can know that we do exist and that they can, reach out for those resources.
Exactly. And this is something that perhaps I'll jump to this question, that on your website, we found extensive list of resources for people with disability during quarantine. We would love for you to describe some of these resources and how you chose them. And do you recommend that other institutions such as schools have some of these resources on hand when they open up?
Yeah, so the resources we have on our website, they're a mixture of different things. So some of them are resources that our team has put together because, we couldn't find anything specific enough for our needs. And then other resources are things that we pulled from other places. Like if we really like something, we pulled it to share with our audience as well. So one of the resources I do want to share is that we have actually something called a COVID social story that's in our shop section of our website, which you can download for free. And that's for people with so caregivers to share with children or adults with special needs to help them understand what's going on. So what a social story is it's like a visual, picture-oriented way of sharing what's happening around the world or what's happening in that specific child's life. So there's all different kinds of social stories you can do. So this one is specific to COVID. So it kind of talks about COVID and why is the MASJID closed and things like that. So it's really specific to our Muslim community and families. So that's something I would recommend if you have someone in your family with special needs or disability to go download that free PDF and share that with them so they can kind of help, understand what's going on. A lot of kids are, could be nonverbal, and those pictures really help them understand what's happening. So that's one of the resources that was made by our team. And then as far as schools and other organizations, I know a lot of them have their own resources which are specific to them. So, it's not really a one size fits all. We just kind of picked out the best resources for us. Yep, there you go. It's right up there. That COVID social story right there, that is a free download that they can take. But yeah, so like I said, schools will have resources that are school related, and then we have resources that are more family related. So it's kind of, just, it's supposed to be a temporary help for people to kind of get through this time, which hopefully won't last too much longer. So yeah, that's what we've got there.
No, that is, thank you for putting that together. And that's the great thing about having parents who have kids with special needs be making these resources, because you know what is needed. And so thank you for putting your experiences to work. When we look at all these different elements, especially as we move forward and things are going through lockdown and then they plan to open up again, what would you, if you had the ear of your local mayor or your local city council or other institutions, what would you say to them to make sure that both quarantine plans and reopening plans properly account for people with disabilities? What alternatives would you give to the plans that are already in place?
Well, one big thing I would say is for local government or organizations or boards, you have to have someone with special needs on your board while you're making these decisions. Again, like I said, 1 in 4, I'm just going to keep saying that because it's a huge population. You should at least have one person representing on your board so when you're having these discussions and when you're discussing these policies, that person should have a voice and, give, like I said, the view from the lens of, disability. If I could just think of an example off the top of my head, if you think about public transportation policies, that's going to look really different if you have someone for example, who uses a wheelchair on your board. They're going to have a very different viewpoint on what the policy should be versus just an able-bodied person. So I think if you don't have that voice on your board, on your local government, you're really missing out on, you know, a whole demographic and like what their viewpoints would be when you're making these really big decisions. Same would be in the school board. So for example, now we have like all these reopening plans that are coming out, and you can really tell the difference between a school board that has a special needs committee versus ones that don't. I mean, it's clear who has that voice in that room and who doesn't. So, you know, a special needs committee for school is like vital. Like they should have, the special ed teachers should be in that room making a decision. The therapists that are in and out of the class, even parents of special needs kids can be part of that committee. But if the school board is just making these educational decisions without that voice there, they're really doing a disservice to those children. They, you know, they really need to have the variety of voices, you know, speaking on their behalf for special needs kids. So, you know, like I said, it's crystal clear when the plans come out who, you know, consulted with someone with special needs or, you know, experience with special needs and which schools didn't. So I think, you know, that's what I would say is, you know, although I'm not an expert in policy and I wouldn't have, you know, an opinion on that, I would say you should have someone there with a disability who is an expert and can help guide the conversation. Yeah.
You know, when I think of the steps that have been taken since Muhsen started and since awareness has been raised about disabilities, and then I think of what the pandemic has done to roll some of those steps back. What is the game plan now to sort of make up for this time, or are you guys using this time to plan post-pandemic events, or you know, it's been, I can as I work for a nonprofit, I know what a disaster it has been for all of us here at Justice for All. I can just only imagine what it's like to be, you know, but it's also been a blessing in some ways because we've been able to be nimble and find other ways to, you know, work with our impacted communities.
Yeah, we have to be very creative these days. So yeah, we just keep going as much as we can. So, you know, whatever programs can transfer to virtual, we've done that. So like, for example, support groups, like we've been able to do virtually. And actually that actually has worked out really well too, because support groups are normally locally in the MASJID. So being virtual, you kind of can talk to people from all over the country and like give each other support too. So that's been really nice. E-learning has, you know, the weekend school has switched to,
how can someone join a support group?
Okay, so like on our social media, you should probably follow our Facebook page, or we have an Instagram page as well. So we always post on their events coming up. And also if you go to mobilise.org, there's an events tab that has all our upcoming events. So all like the support groups and whatever events are coming up, we post them on there. So they can join. And there's usually a link to like register yourself for a support group, so you can join that. So those support groups are actually run by licensed therapists too. So, you know, they help facilitate the conversation, and everything's confidential. You sign like a waiver and everything. So it's like very confidential and, you know, safe place. What else were we saying? Oh yeah, so weekend schools, like we've done e-learning. We have like a whole e-learning program. That is definitely challenging. Like I said, e-learning is not easy for special needs kids, but you know, we're just doing the best we can one-on-one lessons with e-learning. Our RESPITE program, which was such a great program, is on hold right now because we can't have volunteers go into the caregivers home at this point. So that's a bit on hold. Our adult program, which was about to open, like I said, is on hold. So anything, you know, that could be compromising to anyone's health, we've just held off on because it's just, you know, it's not worth it to get anyone sick or anything like that. But, you know, we're doing other things like for Eid, we're doing Eid drive-bys all over the country. So that I'm really excited about that. It's like we have, you know, chapters all over, you know, New Jersey, DC, Bay Area, Houston, Dallas, so Michigan. I don't want to leave anyone out. But we're doing like a Eid drive-by. So it's like an Eid parade. They can go, you know, pick up treats, you know, do little something like that. So we're trying to do as much as we can to just keep going. And like you said, this is actually a really good time for planning. So we've definitely taken advantage of that to do a lot of future planning and things like that. So just trying to make the best efficient use of time.
That's great. And sometimes we think about this, like what can human rights organizations like ours do to support your work, or even when we think about the camps, right? Like the Rohingya camps, or uh, and if we're talking about Kashmir and we're talking about what is happening to the people under the lockdown, I would love to hear your perspective on how we can be more inclusive in our work when we're talking about disability rights.
Yeah. So, I mean, like when you think of a like justice organization like yourself, I mean, justice is for everyone, right? It's not really like for one person or the other. And all the rights of people with disabilities are very similar to those for able-bodied people. So, for example, they want free and fair public education, and that's an issue. And they want affordable housing, healthcare, fair wages, everything like that, which is similar to what typical people would want. So, that doesn't really change. It doesn't need to be like a different kind of justice for those with disabilities. So I would just think like maybe if you're an organization who wants to help, to go back and look again, like I said, look at all your policies and, the things you do through the eyes of someone who's disabled, and see, how you can help. And if you have a hard time doing that, that's something like you could reach out to an advocacy group like ourselves to kind of help you out with that, and see like, because I mean, every organization is so different. It has like specific goals that you would have to look at each one and kind of see. But that's what I would say is like, look at your goals and your policies through the eyes of someone with a disability. For like one really simple example I could give is if you're making some, really great videos, they could probably be closed captioned. So just like little simple things like that you can do to kind of include everybody.
Now the election is coming up, and this is something that one of the things that a lot of times when we are talking to our candidates, our local folks that are running for office or even running for president, those are some things that a lot of times we again forget the kids with special needs. We forget our brothers and sisters with disabilities. So those are some things that I really wanted to highlight, especially to our audience right now. Like if you are looking at candidates who are running to vote, these are some of the things that perhaps you should be asking as well. What are their stances on disability?
Great point. Yeah.
Exactly. It's still illegal it's still legal for disabled people to earn pennies on an hour thanks to a loophole in the Fair Labor Standards Act. This is something that we don't even know. I mean, if I get paid $1 for stacking, shelving books in a library, why do disabled people get paid pennies? This is something, and this needs to be changed. There are other, asset limitations and work requirements to programs that help people with disabilities. But a lot of times those are sort of shoved aside, especially during the economic downturn. So are there anything else that you would like to tell us to keep our eyes out on as November comes up?
Yeah, I mean, like we have such great Muslim organizations that are very political, I guess is the word, and they like really strive for that political action. I would love if those organizations like had a special segment for, the disabled population to help them understand all of these policies. Like the one you just mentioned is such a great one to talk about. And, like as them being experts in that field of like government and politics, it would be so great for them to like just help educate the people, on these very specific topics. So that, that would be something that I would love, and that would be great as we're getting closer to November. Like we're not really a political organization, so we would need that assistance from somebody to kind of really help explain those policies. And even like for the voting itself, I mean, now, like with the pandemic, I don't even know how that's going to work, but even just getting to the polls and voting is a challenge, you know, if you don't have like the transportation. And now, you know, hopefully they'll do a lot of in-home voting, but even just the knowledge of like how to request that in-home voting is, you know, all things that we could and will be helping with as November gets closer. So, you know, little tactical things like that. But as far as like the education and policies, I would love for, you know, a Muslim organization to kind of, you know, kind of think about this perspective and, you know, kind of help us educate on that. That would be really great.
Teaching civil rights to
Exactly.
and this is where I feel like it is needed for organizations to work together to sort of.
Right.
We are a very small segment of the American, you know, fabric, and for us to, you know, when we're working in our niches, it's great to collaborate and bring, you know. So that would be something that we can pitch to other.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. This is, you know, as we're wrapping up the hour, I know we've just got a few minutes left. You know, is there anything that we might have missed out, an overall message that you would like to deliver to our viewers about the pandemic, impact of the pandemic, or just living life in a family with someone with special needs? And that I would really like to hear that.
Yeah, so just like to close out, I would say that this pandemic has really hit hard for special needs families. It is, you know, magnified by times 100 of like what everyone is feeling. So I would really say, like, as we move forward, for everyone to kind of think about what are your neighbors going through, what are your friends going through that, you know, have someone with a disability, and look through that disabled lens. And as, you know, even for leaders, like I mentioned earlier, who are reopening masjids or, you know, have a leadership role in policies or procedures, it's so important, again, to consult with someone who has a disability while you're making those decisions, just so that these people are all included, you know, as we go forward and reopen and go on with our lives.
We have a question from an audience member. They'd like to know how they can become involved.
Oh, I love that question. So I would love if you could go to mobilise.org, which is our website. And there's actually a contact us button where you can choose to just reach out, or if you want to be a volunteer, there's an option that you can click volunteer. And then we actually have a volunteer coordinator who, you know, does really good job, like helping people figure out what segment they want to volunteer in. There's a couple different programs they can do. So she'll reach out to you and kind of see where it would be a good fit.
So that was easy enough. So visit mobilise.org and sign up to volunteer. And we hope to see many more of our brothers and sisters who, you know, the pandemic has really put our lives in a twist, right? Like it's brought a lot of things that were priority up front, like what is my goal in life? And so there are so many opportunities, and we try to present them as much as possible. And this is a beautiful opportunity to give back, you know, at this time, and especially as the pandemic leaves more people disabled. Like even people who are
so true.
So they're like with a lot of it's affecting hearts, it's affecting kidneys. A lot of more people need help now, and so if we can people that you know, follow the call. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Part of our show, and we'd love to have you guys back on. You know, if you have a program coming up that you'd like to let the world know about.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. From my end, I would like to highlight today that you guys joined us for the Kashmir rally this weekend and made it superbly, amazingly successful. We're following up on that with a Twitter storm on August 5th. Every one of you that was watching, it takes a few minutes, get on Twitter and tweet with Kashmir Action is the hashtag. We want as many people to raise their voices for Kashmiris as August 5th comes around. This is a day when they were reoccupied and are crying for and demanding their justice for their people. So thank you so much. Again, you can find out more about the Twitter storm on www.justiceforall.org/Kashmir Rally. The video for the Kashmir Rally is also up on that page, and you can watch it. Please watch it, share it, let people know this was an amazing opportunity for us to bring diverse voices, Kashmiri voices, to the table. And it was the first time that people who were in positions of power got to hear activists and journalists and scholars about what was going on the ground, and talk beyond jargon and talk beyond just. So this was it was a very powerful moment, and we're really, really grateful for all of you that joined in. We will be re-airing it on Muslim Network TV August 5th. Thank you so much for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum.